I didn't ever think that I'd be somebody who tried to take my own life. I didn't think I'd be someone who was depressed.
And it went from being just the usual chatty self to I couldn't cope.
It's something that is talked about in the news, but you don't really think it's ever going to happen. But it does, it happens to so many people more than anyone's going to know.
So anxiety generally is marked by the worry of future threat. And it's the threat of uncertainty in the future. People with anxiety generally have a low tolerance to uncertainty, so everything's future orientated. Depression tends to be much more about that person's view of themselves in the universe. You know, what kind of person they are, and what their hope for their future. With men, because the male burden of performance, invariably depression is often to do with how they view themselves and how they're performing in their role as a male. Post-traumatic stress disorder is when we've had a trauma that we can't process. It's too big. The emotional content of that is too big, so it just hangs around between the long and the short-term memory. All right, and what you get flashbacks, intrusive thoughts. You get a hyper-arousal, which is a feeling of being back at that time because it's just knocking around between the long and short-term memory. It hasn't been able to process it. A lot of my job and a lot of what I do is I'll bring the invisible into the visible. You can't fight an enemy you can't see.
So I first kind of realised that I had some form of mental health issue when I was about 10 or 11. And that's just when I'm starting to go to high school and I'm feeling a bit anxious about it, but you don't really understand that that could affect you. I was bullied for quite a long time just for random little things, for like how my hair looked, how I dressed. And that just doesn't help with the anxiety and stuff like that. So once that kind of manifested itself, you just start becoming quite sad, and then sad turns into depression, and then depression turns into you just don't want to get up anymore. I became physically and verbally sad in my normal life. So during school I barely talked to anyone, and I was quite hunched over and stuff like that, but I could see other people and they were happy and they were laughing, and that just wasn't what I was experiencing on a day-to-day basis. And that's when I remember turning to my family going, something's not quite right. So finding that support through my parents first, and then them accepting what I had and then going on to different kinds of therapy really helped.
I used to say that I suffered from depression for 6 months, but actually when I look back at it now and in hindsight, it was probably about 18 months at least. I'd never had any kind of history of depression or any kind of mental illness of any kind. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what depression was. I didn't know the feelings that I was kind of feeling, the thoughts and the experiences with depression were a thing. So I just kind of covered it up, which I think a lot of people do, and that's part of the problem. I went to see a counsellor. It didn't really work for me. It took me 3 doctors before a doctor actually talked to me about depression and actually told me that antidepressants were an option. I was discharged by the counsellors being fit and healthy, but that was 2 to 3 weeks before I actually tried to take my own life.
I joined the army and had a great time. You cope with it great when you were there because you've got to focus and you're doing a job and everything's there. And it's not until you come home that things go wrong. You've left, you try to fit back into, again, I'll say normal. What's acceptable as life. I didn't quite fit in, and that's when all things were going wrong. Because you've been away, it's a roller coaster. It's the best way I can explain it. You go up that roller coaster and then you're into it. I just came down and down and down and then kept on going down. I was scared to go out. I couldn't pick clothes to dress to go to work. I couldn't pick a tie, I would start sweating. And I mean, absolutely bucketing sweat. Nervous, anxious. I was scared to go in a room with people. And then everything else dives on top. Then you get the night terrors, sweats, and then you just start basically breaking down for the most ridiculous thing. A song on the radio would have me in tears.
And I didn't really know about depression at the time. It's something that is talked about in the news, but you don't really think it's ever going to happen.
The best way I can describe how I felt when I was depressed was like living in a bubble. I was aware of the outside world, I was in the outside world, but I couldn't feel it, I couldn't connect to it, I couldn't channel any of my thoughts or any of my feelings or emotions. I was begging for like a clear thought, to be able just to have a thought where I can go, okay, I've got a plan or, you know, a way through. And then just one day I got a clear thought, which was kill yourself.
People come to see me with loads of things. Often what's happened is that they've come to a realisation that they want to change something, whether that's their mood or that's something they're doing. They know they're distressed, they know they have a problem with something, they know it. They know they've got a problem with anxiety and they want to make a change, but they don't know how to do it. And that's where the skill really of kind of the therapist comes in. So the whole thing is about change, and that's really the only constant, is generally if they come, they're wanting change. Some people, may come and they'll be presenting as very flat, other people will be coming and they'll be presenting as very anxious. Some people will be ambivalent, some people will be very suspicious of therapy. They've never had therapy before, sat in front of this guy they've never met before, and what was all this about? Everybody comes as an individual, there isn't really any kind of trend I can see. It's just a load of people, lots of different people with lots of different issues. The ability to stand back and look at what's going on for you is the trick to it. And some people just need help with that.
Probably the biggest part of that recovery was the reaction of my family. They were so comforting and they were so normal about it. They were straight from as soon as I went home, they were all about, it's okay, no one's going to judge you for this, you've got nothing to be worried about, we're here for you, we're going to make sure that you're going to get better. And that was probably the biggest part of that recovery, knowing that they were there for me, knowing that I wasn't going to be judged by my family for that, and knowing that they were protective of me. I decided if I was going to move on, if I was going to really recover, I couldn't lie anymore. I've spent so many months lying that I decided just to announce it on social media. I've been depressed, I tried to kill myself, this is how I tried to do it. And kind of the response that I got was just, I was not prepared for. And I was getting people messaging me every single day saying, hearing my story had helped them. Hearing my stories helped them realise they're going through something. Hearing my stories made them want to actually go and get help, or to speak to a family member or speak to somebody about that. And it kind of made me realise that responsibility that I was taking on by speaking about that. And every single time I was being asked to give an interview, which I was, and local press, national press, I was getting more and more messages, and that, I suppose, was part of that therapy and counselling session for me, to give me fire in my belly, to give me purpose, that I felt like I had nothing to offer anybody or nothing to offer the world. So suddenly I got this purpose again.
So at first, as is probably widely known throughout men, you don't talk about it, you get on with it, because everyone says, oh, man up, which I hate the phrase man up, I hate it with a passion. But I knew I needed something, and I couldn't carry on. Because of that, I knew I needed to take steps for myself first before going to any kind of therapy, because in order to get help from someone else, you really need to put yourself forward first and work on yourself before you even go into anything like that. So I went to the university counselling services, and they took me very seriously. They understood that I'd need support straight away. It was 5 weeks of counselling, 1 session a week for an hour, which in the grand scheme of things isn't loads, but for someone that has never had any therapy before was quite a big breakthrough for me.
Didn't have a clue. The doctor doesn't understand it, and most of the guys who suffer from PTSD, the doctor just doesn't know. He just doesn't know where to start. And then I went to Talk Liverpool, seen a guy called Glyn. He explained in his words, which are quite more down to earth, on why things don't work for you as a provider, and how men function and all this. One of the main exercises he gave me was not giving a fuck. Right, he said, your life's been built around perfection, trying to do everything 100%. And he went, try to just not give a fuck. And I'm like, what? And to realise that you can't always attain perfection, and not to beat yourself to death because you're not getting to that there, and don't worry about it.
I'd like to think that mental health be more and more accepted, you know, or more recognised, or that people will start to be more empathic towards those suffering with mental health problems, particularly the severe and enduring. We're always going to have it. I think how we view it as society and how we're going to view that in society, I'd like to think that it would improve.
I think with men, what kind of a lot of men struggle with is the idea of how to talk to each other. And I think the biggest problem is the idea of vulnerability. Not just men, but I think particularly with men, to find it hard to kind of bring themselves to talk about that. And I think there's a myth that men don't want to talk. I think men do want to talk. I think men just don't know how to talk, or where to talk, or when is the right time to talk, or the right way to talk. But also I think it's about really challenging the stereotypes that men seem to have. It is changing, but there's a hell of a long way to go.
So many people out there will be suffering. So if anyone out there at the minute is feeling any ounce of depression, any ounce of anxiety, there are 8 billion people on this planet. There is at least one person out there that feels the exact same way that you do. So you're never ever going to be alone.
There's light at the end of the tunnel. There's people being in your situation, and there's answers there. To get out of this, you've got to work hard, and it's your effort that does it. It's no tablet will get you out of this. No counsel will get you out. They'll help you and enable and facilitate to push that way. But if you want that help, you've got to do it yourself, and it's you that will cure yourself. There's no magic snake oil like that. But it will be hard work, but the hard work pays off.